Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to day 4 now of the conference. And so far it's been spectacular, and we're just kicking off. Today we're live at a yacht club in San Francisco. We have a beautiful view, and we've got a nice little gathering here, and we're looking forward to having a great talk. Today we're going to be talking about the future of digital health and investing in global health. And this particular talk happens to be sponsored by our network, Global Health Impact Network. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about how our approach to investing in the healthcare space. I'd like to welcome our participants, and I'd like to just go through a little bio background of each one. So we'll start with Bob Sweeney. Bob and I have known each other for 27 years plus. And Bob was actually the CEO of the company that acquired my first company as a serial entrepreneur. And we've worked together ever since. And about 3 years ago, I approached Bob with the idea of Global Health Impact Fund and Global Health Impact Network. And he was the first one to jump on board. Bob is one of a select group of proven national experts in the acquisition, management, evaluation, and promotion of agreements between healthcare organizations and physicians. His areas of expert competencies include emergency medicine, neurological rehabilitation, home health care, managed care, and medical information needs of hospitals and physicians. His professional competencies include general and financial management, investment, fundraising, executive sales and negotiations, direct response, marketing techniques, sales management, and public relations. Bob's also experienced in the commercialization of intellectual property developed in academic environments and the organization of academic and professional advisory boards. As a principal and co-founder of Global Health Impact Fund and Network, he serves on several client company boards, advises others, and is director of our company's education network. Bob holds 4 earned master's degrees and a doctorate from Carnegie Mellon University. There and during his postdoc appointments at MIT and Dartmouth, he developed and published a curriculum based on this thesis. One master's thesis was the design of a neural network to diagnose appendicitis, which was commercialized from 1997 to 2010. In November 2005, Bob was selected by the University of Memphis, where he resides half the time these days, the other half in the Bay Area, for its prestigious Outstanding Alumnus Award. So Bob, let's start out. Bob's going to talk a bit about Global Health Impact Network's education network. I'll give a little bit of background before he starts just about GHIN and GHIF. So after, being as myself, a dentist, a physician, an anesthesiologist, practiced clinically for 35 years, and then moved to the Bay Area in 89 at the beginning of the bubble, the tech bubble. Started my first company in the early 90s, which was one of the first online continuing education portals and platforms. As I said, Bob's company acquired that one. That was followed by a second company which was using our first platform, and then going to India and China in the late 90s during a nursing shortage, and bringing training nurses in country all over India and in Shanghai, and bringing them to the United States on H-1B visas. That was followed by a stint, which still continues to this day, of being one of 10 physician informaticists for the Sutter healthcare system here in the Bay Area. We have 27 hospitals using Epic. So that was my foray into electronic healthcare records and the most recent version of what we refer to as digital health. Subsequently, we started a third company, which was one of the first online companies addressing provider data management and credentialing for clinicians, practices in large enterprises. And that all led to traveling around the country as a consultant and finding that every clinician that I ran into was disenfranchised, unhappy with the direction in which healthcare was taking us, very unhappy with electronic healthcare records and how they've been developed without the input of clinicians. So it became my passion as a retirement project in life to create a network and a way to fund that network in a way that democratized the investment process for my colleague clinicians in healthcare. So we started Global Health Impact Fund initially with the idea of clinicians being actively involved in the process. So we like to say that our fund and network, what they promote is collaboration, communication, education, and active participation as investors, advisors, consultants in the evolving digital health revolution. And then the idea that on the fund side, democratizing the process. I always like to say that when was the last time that Kleiner Perkins in Silicon Valley, one of the biggest venture capitalists, knocked on one of our doors and said, I've got the next Google in healthcare. Would you like to put some money in our venture fund? It just doesn't happen. So that's the reason that we started with the fund. Fund one is about to close. We're starting 2 new funds this month, an institutional fund and another member fund. And the fund's thesis and focus is digital health and health tech innovation. We've been very successful with Fund 1 from an investment perspective. We've invested in what we believe are 10 great companies, probably half of which are market disruptive. And what differentiates our investment process is that we have a very, very heavy focus on our clinical network, and our due diligence is completed, including clinicians that are active and targeted in the field that we're looking at. So they play a very active role as investors, advisors, and consultants in the process. So as part of that, it became quite apparent that one of the biggest needs and desires of our members of our network was from an educational perspective. And I don't necessarily mean clinical education, but education around innovation, entrepreneurism, finance, investment. And we also do provide continuing medical education as well as part of our network. And Bob is in charge of that. And Bob is the one who's helping us build and expand it from a domestic model to a global model. So Bob, I'd like you to take it away.
Good enough, Gary. Is that slide deck there or not?
Let's see. Do you have access to the deck? Why don't you just do it because you have access to share it.
Let's see if I can do that. Share screen. I hit it, and now I hit my PowerPoint. All right. So I don't know about the rest of you, but when I hear the word education, it's I have kind of the same.
Bob, we don't see it. We don't see the screen yet.
All right. Well, let's just pass on that. I don't want to take up a lot of time on it. But here, the main point I'm trying to make is that with education, when I hear the word education or I hear the word the environment, when we're talking about climate science, my eyes tend to roll and my brain tends to shut down. And the reason for that is that support for education is a mile wide and an inch deep. When it actually comes to doing something or having action or activity, most people, they're for it, but they don't know exactly what it is they're for. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that education is a kind of what we call in business a cottage industry. There's dozens of companies, large and small, entrepreneurs, founders, and each of them has their own agenda, and each of them has their own thoughts and ideas about what it means to educate or to learn. There's no consensus. There's no common industry agreement about what it means to do those things. So we're trying to do something about that. We think that a Global Health Impact Network education function is poised to create revolutionary change for physicians and learners. And there's 2 ways we plan to go about that. One way is to focus on evidence-based education. And we all know what evidence-based medicine is, but evidence-based education is a more controversial topic. But it turns out there really is such a thing. And there are places such as the Department of Education at UCLA that study and research these things. There are facts, there are outcomes that validate different ways to study, how to find results, how to measure test effectiveness, And those things are usually not used very much in teaching, and they're certainly not used very much in clinical teaching. So we rely, for the most part, on heuristics and on past behavior, which, a good part of the time is worthwhile and correct, but another part of the time is not. So our methods and our efforts try to bring evidence-based medicine into the story. The second thing we're trying to do is to broaden the definition of education and learning for clinicians so that it includes things such as finance and other areas that are relevant to what they do. We're trying to integrate the silos, to use another type of terminology, so that folks that are in our network can easily transposition themselves from one area to another and jointly engage their learning. One of the problems in clinical education, is true in all forms of education, is that there's a tension between testing and actually retaining or learning things. So we test because we have to. I mean, the public, the specialties expect us to be able to demonstrate competency, and they do that by means of one kind of test or another. The problem with testing is that it doesn't really, the way they're designed, most tests, for reasons I'll explain in a second, don't really do a very good job of providing retention. Retention requires time. It requires the application of learning methods and test preparation methods that are in contrast to what the specialties do these days. There's no evidence. In fact, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary, that multiple choice testing and that kind of stuff doesn't really teach you much of anything. You can learn those things in the short term, long enough to pass an exam, but there's no evidence that you actually retain anything that way. So our model, and we have partners we're attracting to work with us. I'll talk about them in just a second. We're bringing these partners into the loop so they can help us broaden the definition of learning and education, and to make it possible to have testing and self-reward systems that are based on evidence as opposed to anecdote. So, for example, we have Challenger Corporation, a national online education company, building an LMS with us. A learning management system is a platform for learning, tracking, teaching, and maintaining records of performance. We have MedForums working as a partner to build a badging and scoring system with us. We're working with Quantic, which is an M.B.A. program, to build an online, affordable, collegial M.B.A. program and learning program for physicians who are interested in business. These are just 2 or 3 examples of those things. So I'm quite enthused about that. I could talk easily for over an hour about this subject alone, but we have a number of physicians, clinical physicians and others, academic physicians, involved in helping us design new tools and new courses that aren't boxed into a silo. So, for example, we have a physical medicine physician at Stanford, Dr. Karandikar, building a cross-specialty musculoskeletal medicine course for us that will add to the knowledge and add to the learning opportunities for emergency and family physicians who see patients. They don't see patients who don't have those kinds of conditions. They see patients who have issues, and the issues can overlap into other areas. So I'm just picking that as an example. I don't want to use up too much time here, but I invite you to contact me or contact the organization to learn more. And if you have ideas about education you'd like to share with us, and you'd like to get in the game, so to speak, let us know, and we'll be quite responsible. Thanks, Gary.
Great. Thank you, Bob. So next up is Martyn Eeles. Martyn is the Operations Director for Global Health Impact Network and Global Health Impact Fund, as well as the leader of the Finance and Investment Network. Our Finance and Investment Network is another division of our network, which is focused on our partner venture capital colleagues, as well as our that part of our network is again focused on democratizing the investment process from the investor perspective, not just individual investors, but anyone or any organization that's a healthcare investor. So our network is trying to be somewhat agnostic, because what we noticed is not only was there a lacking of a great place for collaboration at the level of practices and individual clinicians, but also at healthcare investors. So we're trying to create a global financial investment network completely focused on healthcare, but it's coming from the clinical perspective, which becomes a resource that's very difficult for other venture capitalists to access, which would be, let's say, a network of 1 million clinicians globally that could act as advisors, consultants, potentially as investors in the due diligence and then post-investment portfolio management from a business development standpoint, from a marketing sales standpoint, and also from a development standpoint. So Martyn is heading up that aspect of our network. He's a former top 10 financial advisor in Europe and has worked in finance for over 10 years. As an advisor, he has managed over 250 million and raised over 300 million for private equity deals. And he's also a qualified executive leadership coach. And Martyn is very focused on the finance, investment, and fund side of our operation. Martyn, take it away.
Thanks, Debbie. I think you did half of my talk for me. So. Hey everybody. So I'm the operations director. I want to talk to you today about the finance and investment network. Gabby covered actually a lot of points I was going to discuss, like GHIN and GHIF. We started out with the fund that helped create our network. Now, on the network, we use a platform called Hands-In. I'm sure you heard Mike Galvin speak yesterday about the platform. It's a fantastic platform. And on this platform, we have over 100+ communities on the network. These are networks in AI, AI in neurology, blockchain, chiropractic care, cybersecurity, and many, many more. Now, as the network we're growing and we're expanding globally. Like we have GHI in Europe, we have India, we have Africa, all opening up this year. But the whole reason we're setting up the finance and investment community network basically is collaboration, to foster collaboration among healthcare investors, VCs, angel groups, family offices. Now, one reason this is important, it's because it's almost impossible to quickly learn as much, especially about like a hot startup that you want to be invested in. Like sharing due diligence can be extremely valuable. And, I think that's what makes GHIN, GHIF unique. Our due diligence process is clinically focused for all our investment funds. Collaboration can also be pursued to gain access to new markets as well as expertise. It's like Gary said, if we have over thousands of clinicians worldwide, you have a network there of advisors and investors globally. So why is collaboration key, especially when it comes to the finance and investment? The primary motivations for pursuing quasi-formal relationships and more formal strategic partnerships, especially with the industry-leading health tech companies. These include to help the VC firm in its evaluation of the potential investments, as well as gaining a better understanding of industry needs, the shifts in the overall market, changes to specific regulations. All of this, which allows the VCs to better select investments and better to position their portfolio firms for a better exit. Now, we don't just want to cater to VCs, we're also creating an environment for angel investors and family offices to leverage the network for clinician investments. And as Gary said, our current network are advisors, that are investors, that are health professionals, all interested in the healthcare investments. So, you're mostly sat there thinking, why should I join? If you're an investor especially in the healthcare sector, sharing deal flow, it doesn't hurt. The more VCs and investors that specialize in this sector, it's great. But it's not just that. The network, we have industry leaders, such as Bob, Chris Kager, Mike Byrne. We have so many industry leaders and we have so many different communities And we already have other top 3C firms who are part of the finance and investment network. We're growing this out globally. So this is not just US, this is for SPVs. You can invest in the funds, you can invest in any kind of investment that we will look at, especially for startups and other VC funds. If you want to know more, you can always contact me or anyone at the GHI and GHIF. We're always happy to share what we're doing. We're building this out very openly in the public, so it's not hard to figure out what we're doing. But yeah, I think that's it for me, Gary. You covered a lot of my points, so thank you.
All right, great. No, thank you, Martyn. Next up is Rachna. Rachna has a unique background and a set of experiences across technology, healthcare, startups, and corporations. She is currently transforming customer experience for Johnson & Johnson supply chain. Breadth and depth that enables her to make impactful end-to-end business decisions. Her experiences include supply chain, strategy and innovation, marketing and market research, change management, and R&D across USA, Europe, and Asia. And she has spent a significant part of her career creating and launching new strategies, whether it has been in semiconductor technology, new disease areas, or innovative service solutions. She is a believer that progress happens when an amazing idea is given a fair chance with strong execution. Her hobbies include traveling, music, and writing science fiction short stories, and Rachna is currently based out of New Jersey in the US. Rachna and I have spent a lot of time talking about the network from a global corporate expansion perspective. We've given her background, and she's been a great resource for GHIN in that capacity. Rachna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Gary, for the lovely introduction. And, I really enjoyed thoughts from you, from Bob, and from Martyn as well. I will have some overlaps in my discussion as well, obviously, because the topic of digital health, we do see things, in a similar fashion, no matter which part of the industry we're in. I would like to begin by my focus on three key pillars that I see that are important in this era of digital healthcare, global expansion. The first thing, which is very near and dear to my heart, is that of, which I consider as a big prize, is that of getting healthcare to the populations that need it most, right? And, if we go back 10 years in time, without the support of digital technologies, healthcare was not accessible to people that needed it in most of the cases, either because they didn't have the resources, they were in remote locations, or for some reason, rhyme or reason, they had limited mobility, right? And all of these factors, when you combine together, took access of healthcare away from a lot of people, millions and millions of people across the globe and in US itself. What I would say is that digital health has really helped with this. And we're nowhere near nirvana in this field. I think there's a lot of progress still to be made, and to make sure that access is available across countries, across continents like Africa, Asia, even Latin America, to populations that need healthcare, and digital health is the bridge that is going to make that happen. So that is extremely exciting. Technology has been a key enabler, I think. And I don't just mean from a telehealth perspective, an advisory perspective, but if you take a look at the fields of bioinformatics, things like advanced self-learning animal models, these are things that are helping across the drug delivery and development and delivery processes, development of new devices, coupled with AI and smart algorithms that can go beyond just, having a device which is static, for example, in many, many cases, right? So, and then there's a whole, there's a whole group of these solutions that are just online through an app, through services and solutions without a device or a drug, right? So it's really helping across many, many different fields, I believe. And that brings me to the third topic of what I call intersectionality. Because what we are trying to work with here is a huge problem of making human health better. We need multidisciplinary expertise to make this work. We need the tech entrepreneurs who will want to create new startups in medtech, and then we will need the clinicians who can advise these entrepreneurs regarding, clinical challenges that they face every day. What are the challenges and inefficiencies in the care pathways? As they take care of patients, as they deliver care to people who need it most, right? And to be able to do that, having clinicians available to invest, to guide, and to support all the way from, the inception of an idea to a successful exit where the product is actually helping patients in the field, I think that is something that is wonderful. And we haven't done that enough. If you traditionally look 20 years ago, different networks of, functional expertise, people were interacting amongst themselves, but there was not this intersectionality present. And I think this will be critical to success going forward in the future. And that's what excites me about, the GHIN network in itself, right? That's what the value is. It's a different value proposition. It is going to bring success, hopefully faster, better, and to a bigger population. Moving on from that, I think, Gary, you mentioned this very early on in your thoughts, was democratization of healthcare, right? And when I think of democratization of healthcare, I think of both sides. I think of the provider, the clinician side, and the patient side, both. And as Gary mentioned earlier on, the EMR systems that were created a long time ago were not quite user-friendly. Now, let's not be too critical of them, because when they were created and when they were put in place, they were a big step up from just having manual, books where people would write about the patients to actually having electronic health records available online. But these record systems were rudimentary. They were not interconnected. And even today, you will find that not hospital or healthcare systems will have ERP and EMR systems integrated. So I think there's a long way we still have to go. And these EMR systems are used by clinicians and nurses and other care providers. So we do need their input and how to make them better. What are the pain points that are really need to be resolved for them to find more time, to have a better work-life balance, if they may. Because we're getting a lot of reports across the industry that clinicians are suffering from very long working hours, burnouts, and inefficient and user-unfriendly solutions. So we really have to focus on creating these more efficient solutions that can improve the processes of caregiving. And the third topic that can really help our clinicians, I think, and we need their advice on how these startups and new technologies can help is, with the help of AI and looking at aggregate and population health, we should be able to create systems that can provide signals on if a clinician is going to see a patient in the near future, if all of the EHR records are integrated and the continuous health monitoring data is available, then are they looking to provide them advice on just how to keep maintaining and going on and keeping up the good, healthy practices they have? Do they need chronic care management? Is there some signal in the health parameters that is worrying and needs an intervention? And so these are systems that do not replace clinician knowledge, but they actually help them make smarter decisions better. And you see a lot of solutions existing in the marketplace. I think we need more of those solutions to help streamline healthcare. Looking at the other side of the table, right? Then looking at patient populations, technology has also enabled us to make the whole process of clinical trials, drug discovery, and things like that much more inclusive. The pandemic forced a lot of companies to adopt hybrid clinical trials, which meant that they could also go after a diverse patient population. They could go after a more remote patient population because patient monitoring and monitoring of vitals and other signals could be done remotely. Not necessarily because we wanted to, but because we were forced to. And that has given a big shift and a big change into the inclusiveness factor within healthcare, because COVID itself and the vaccines of COVID itself have shown that different genetic groups of population respond differently to vaccines, and they do to other medications as well. So we do need that inclusiveness. So we do need to democratize healthcare, because until we do that, we won't be able to see the really big benefits of digital health.
Okay. Oh,
Just one more point, Gary, just checking if I have time for like 2-3 more
you're good.
minutes.
You're good.
Good. So then I wanted to shift focus on what we are seeing as a big behavioral shift, not just at like a country or an industry level, but I think we're seeing it as a human race. You know, the whole ship of human race, which is huge and big, is starting to steer in the direction of self-monitoring and understanding the mechanisms of prevention. It's not just the doctor talking to people. I see the consciousness coming in the people with the help of technology, because now we can see our signals. We can see, you know, I can see with my Garmin a lot of information on how I'm sleeping, how am I exercising, are my CO2 levels good enough or not? And if you combine that information with the yearly or the 6 monthly visits that I do with my physician as a regular yearly checkup, that information together is far more powerful than, you know, measurements made at one point in time. So we've seen this big shift from going from once a year health checkup to somebody like myself who's not educated in the field of, you know, healthcare or clinical knowledge, but I'm starting to monitor my own health parameters. The second thing, big shift, which is now happening across countries and geographies, is that health records have gone from being clinician-owned health records to patient owning the health data and having availability through online access and an integration of health records. And regardless of whether I move across countries or I move to a completely different area within the United States itself, I know my EHR can be transferred to the new health system where I will be going. And that's a big sign of comfort, because if, God forbid, something goes wrong, the data, my history, health history is available for better diagnosis and better treatment as well. And that's huge if you think about individuals and their life. The third key shift that I'm seeing is we're going from treatment, going to a doctor when we feel sick and getting treated for it, and hopefully recovering and coming back and being able to live normal lives. We're moving away from that to prediction-based prevention. There's so many applications, there's so many tools and technologies now available. And all of these are pointing, because all of these have a marketplace and many of them are succeeding, it's pointing to a mind shift in people, where people want to own their health trajectory and their lifestyle and have a longer, healthier life. And to me, all of these areas of opportunity, the 3 different shifts that I've mentioned, all of them require insights both from clinicians and from patients and people who are experts in population health as well. So I think we are really looking at a new business model of how to invest in startups, how to take them to success and improve population health. Thank you, Gary.
Rachna, thank you. I'll just chime in quickly. With respect to, you know, all of that valuable input, with respect to the democratization of healthcare, the other thing that I'd like to add is that it brings up a very important word, which is trust. It's that it takes so long for changes to happen in healthcare is trust and clinical validation. And we are trying to create, with this network and fund, a trust environment. You know, for those of us who have a little bit of gray hair, we remember the good housekeeping seal of approval for products, right? Well, we're trying to create a global organization which can act as the good housekeeping seal of approval for healthcare technology, because it's a network of clinicians, and the clinicians are the ones that decide the direction in which we invest. The companies that we invest in, we try to identify those that are clinically relevant and market disruptive. So it becomes very important when it's adopted by the clinicians and then it's promoted and commercialized through a clinician network. It brings a lot of validation for whatever solution or innovation that we're talking about. And with the only goal that's important from a clinician and patient, I don't even really love to use the word patient, but person, basically, it's anyone who needs care or who is trying to maintain or improve their health, the goal to optimize the patient-provider interface. And that requires a shift from episodic to complete care, which includes genomics, preventative medicine, and precision-based care. That has to have a value-based approach, and it should be focused on price transparency, and it has to provide global access to excellent care for all. And that's one of the great things about health tech and digital technology is it's very easy to deploy using smartphones to the most remote places of the world. So that becomes very important, and we will talk some more about that. Next up, last but certainly not least, is Dr. Sarah Adams. Sarah is a physician and medical consultant advising med tech and biotech companies on global expansion, operational excellence, and quality assurance. She leads international medical consulting projects, providing services to Fortune 25 companies, and has a special interest in the worldwide fight against COVID-19 digital misinformation. As a bilingual German-English speaker with clinical experience in the UK, Germany, Hong Kong, and the US, Sarah is passionate about leveraging international clinical networks to advance world health. Dr. Adams earned her medical degree from the University of Oxford, completed specialty training at the Oxford Foundation School and the University of Louisville, and is board certified in general pediatrics and pediatric hospital medicine. She has over 15 years of experience as a clinician and held an academic appointment at the University of North Carolina for over 8 years. During her clinical work, Dr. Adams saw the importance of clinician input to the development, application, and expansion of digital and biotech products in order to maximize their potential to impact patients' health. Sarah has acted as a scientific advisor for startups in the med tech and medical device industries and currently serves as the director of clinical investigation for MomTech Inc. Sarah and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about the global expansion of our clinician network, and with her experience, we're looking forward to be working with her at the Global Health Impact Network. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Gary. And I'm gonna just share my screen here. Is that showing up okay for you?
Mm-hmm.
Great, okay. Well, thank you everybody, and thank you so much, Gary, and all the organizers for having me here. It's a real honor to share the podium with people with so much experience and such experts in the field. So I feel like this is quite some expertise to follow here, but I will certainly do my best. So I founded Antyllus Global Consulting with my partner, who is a business consultant with 20 years of experience in finance and program management. And together we try to combine clinical, technical, and business expertise to help companies leverage clinician input to create scalable processes and to facilitate global expansion. And that's really what I want to talk to you guys about today, is this idea of how do we expand globally from a clinician perspective. So you want to reach clinicians on a global scale. Maybe it's to partner with them, maybe it's to recruit them, sell to them, you want them to engage with your product, with your service. Doesn't really matter. The question is, how do you expand strategically? So when we think about global expansion, we like to consider 3 areas: motivation, network, and culture. So for example, what motivates a clinician to interact or engage with a product? So there's a few different areas, and in different countries, some of these might weigh more heavily than in others. There's intellectual curiosity, there's career advancement, there's advancing patient and population health, and then there's compensation, like for all of us. And in different countries, what motivates a clinician to engage is going to be different. The second question is, how do you find clinicians? How do you interact with them in a network that they're already using? What avenue is the preferred method of connecting with them? It might be print media, it might be advertising, or it might be word of mouth, or it could be social media, and if it's social media, what network? But most importantly, the culture, the business culture and the healthcare culture in in that country, in that context, is going to provide an overarching context for both motivation and for networking. So if we don't know the culture, we're going to have difficulty with both of those things. So if we take an example to think about motivation. For one of my large international projects, I was recruiting a team of physicians in Germany and a team of physicians in the US. And we noticed that an approach that had been working very well in the US was really not working well in getting clinicians to commit to working with us in Germany. And what we noticed is that in Germany, people were all about, is this intellectually stimulating to me? Does this feel like something that is going to be fun for me to do? Because I'm taking it on in addition to my regular patient care. So I don't want to take something on if it doesn't interest me, if the subject matter doesn't interest me. And that was very different, and we needed to speak to that motivation differently than for our team in the US, where we had noticed that all clinicians, or many clinicians, were looking for a side gig, a way to earn a little bit extra money on the side while doing something that wasn't clinical care. Gary already spoke to how prevalent this feeling of disenfranchisement is in the clinician community, of feeling like, oh, I'm just burning out on patient care. And even people who are really enjoying their patient care want to do something else as well on the side. So the motivation here was vastly different, and we needed to approach the outreach differently due to these two things. The culture of the country and what is worthwhile to people was really affecting how effective we were at reaching out to clinicians. I want to talk about one more example. So networking. Businesses in the US very frequently use LinkedIn as their primary social media source for networking. But clinicians in the US, unless they are active in entrepreneurship or consulting or biotech, often are not going to be on LinkedIn, or if they are on LinkedIn, it's a really outdated profile and they're probably not checking their messages. However, in the US, a lot of clinicians are using Facebook. There's a lot of Facebook groups where physicians interact. There's a gigantic Facebook group called Physician Moms Group with all female physicians. And there's a lot of networking and exchange of ideas that happens in those groups. But this kind of dichotomy is not going to be the same in other countries. In another country, LinkedIn might be a great place to reach out to physicians. Or, for example, Crossing is the preferred LinkedIn alternative in Germany with over 16 million users there. So when we consider culture, it's important not to just consider the culture of the country we're expanding into, but specifically the culture of the healthcare industry and then how those two interact. But there's a difference between moving laterally into a new country. You've been successful in one, we're moving into another. So now we can adapt the product and messaging to address these differences versus international teams or international products that have to function integratedly. So we really can't change them for each country. So then we need to plan for international inclusion. So cultural and industry norms can influence how messages are written and interpreted based on language, culture, assumptions, experience, and expectations. And that is a whole talk by itself, but I only have 10 minutes. So I want to focus here specifically on how to set up cross-cultural teams for success. This is something that I've done with great success and I have quite a bit of experience in. So I thought this would be a really helpful thing to talk to you guys about. Today, I really consider 8 areas of cultural differences when I'm talking about team culture. But because I only have this very short period of time to talk to you guys, I'm going to specifically focus on 2 of them, communication and trust. So I'm going to show you an example of how to set these up for international inclusion. So when we talk about communication in the cultural context, and this is going to be familiar to some of you, but I'm guessing maybe not to all of you, so I'm just going to start off by explaining it. We differentiate between low context and high context communication. Low context communication basically means what I mean is contained directly in my words, and my words mean exactly what they say. There's not much emphasis on body language, similes, metaphors. So you don't need a lot of context to understand what I'm saying. You can just take my words exactly as they come out. versus high context communication, where a lot of what I'm saying is going to be conveyed without words, or my words might have hidden meanings depending on the sentences I'm saying. So there's a lot of context that helps bring across my message. And unfortunately, if you don't know the specific country context, that's going to make it difficult to understand what someone's message is. And so if you're laterally entering a country, you can just learn about how the context works in a high context communication country. But in a cross-cultural team, we can't do that, because even two team members who are both from high context countries, if they're from different contexts, will not be able to interpret each other's signals correctly a lot of the time. So in a cross-cultural team, we want to explicitly designate that low context communication is the norm for our team. And we want to remind team members to be aware of their own high context interpretations that they might be adding to someone else's speech or messages. That's going to prevent misunderstandings and foster clear lines of communication. We can train ourselves to use what I call closed loop low context communication. So I try to say exactly what I mean, and when I'm hearing something, especially if it seems maybe a little odd or slightly offensive or giving me some anxiety, I say, what I'm hearing you say is that you think we should do this differently, or you think that this deadline is too tight, and then giving them a chance to say, oh no, that's not what I meant. So we can train ourselves closed loop in the same way that we train our trainee physicians to use closed loop communication in a code context. So it feels really strange, but we run these simulation codes, right? And it's like you say, I want a dose of epinephrine, and then the other person says, I'm hearing you say you want a dose of epinephrine. I'm pulling it up now. I'm giving the epinephrine. Okay, you gave the epinephrine. It sounds weird, but you get used to it, and we can get used to this in a team context as well. The second area I want to talk to you about is trust. So in cultures that have more task-based trust, what that means is that people trust you because they've seen you do good work, or because you come with credentials that suggest you're going to do good work and have done good work in the past. However, in countries with relationship-based trust, the personal relationship is at the core of the business relationship. So if we have a team that's coming together and they're working on a joint process, and we have members from both types of cultures, task-based trust is more likely to just develop in the course of normal business. You see people meeting deadlines and giving you what you need, and so you start to trust them. Relationship-based trust, especially in a virtual team, needs more attention, especially by the team members for whom that is not culturally intuitive. So the leadership needs to pay attention to this and foster the establishment of relationship-based trust deliberately and make space for that. So in conclusion, you want to plan for global expansion before you're ready for it. That way you can set things up in an integrated way, so there's less adapting that needs to be done later. Integrate everything that you can, but then still adapt as you move as much as possible. And to do all those things, you need to find experts to help you connect with clinicians in your target context to get that input early on. That's all from me. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for letting me speak to you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great. So now I'd like to move on to the second part of the panel, which is just some questions, and we do have some questions. So I'll start off here. Let's see. So, well, Sarah, since we'll keep you on a roll here. So one of the questions I have is, with global expansion of Global Health Impact Fund and Network and the worldwide discrepancies in physician salaries, how do you see or envision encouraging access to members in all countries? You know, and you and I have had this conversation. Just because we're doing something from a network perspective that addresses the wants and desires of a clinician in one geographic location, it may be very, very different when we move to a different continent and a different country. So I'd love your approach to that.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this really just speaks to the importance of thinking about that motivation factor, right? Like, what is going to motivate a clinician to come and work with the GHIN or GHIF? I think it's going to be different in different countries. And in one country, we might have much more people that are focused on the network, and another country might have people really excited about joining the fund and then joining the network as an end result of that. So I think it really depends. I'm sure that Martyn also probably would be able to give some insight into this question as to how do we open this up to investors in different countries. And that's not so much my area, but I think that that just thinking about, you know, what is the value add for clinicians in this country? Where do we add the most value to their life? And I think the great thing about GHIN is it's so varied, right? It's not just investment. There's a lot of value that you can get out of interacting with your peers globally. I mean, one of the projects I lead, we have this global team meeting, and we have physicians of 20 countries all coming together to talk about this content that we're analyzing. And it's just amazing. I mean, we're hearing the perspective of someone in India, the perspective of somebody in the Netherlands, the perspective of somebody in Israel and in the US, all in one meeting, all sharing how this impacts their clinical work in the moment. And even in the COVID-19 crisis, the news cycle cannot be as fast as it is. It cannot be as fast as just putting a bunch of clinicians in one room and talking about what COVID is doing in their country, in their hospital.
Thank you. This is directed at Rachna. Rachna, what kind of role do you believe clinicians can play in taking health tech startups to success?
Thanks, Carrie. I think a huge one across various stages of, idea inception to development to exit. Very often, what I find when I mentor health tech startups to talk to, very, very smart entrepreneurs is that they have created a product which has a value proposition, and they are trying to create the value proposition for the wrong target audience, right? So if you think about the healthcare system, right? A hospital system, a network of hospitals, if I may, and you look at how the roles are distributed. There are certain decision makers that work on supply chain. Then there are others who make clinical decisions. Then there are others like P&T committees who work on, the drugs and medicines that will be dispersed through the network. And so clinicians can really help them understand the value chain within the healthcare system. But also the clinicians have a very, very good understanding, because they interact with patients day in and day out. They also have an understanding of how these developments may impact the patient population. So they're kind of like the bridge in between the health systems, the patients, and their own clinical expertise, right? So having those insights are very valuable for product development, and even more so for refinement, because very often you'll find that you'll have a very great product or service, but people don't know why it did not make it, even though the team might be very strong, the pricing could be correct. You didn't make it because you were off tangent just by a few degrees by getting to the right stakeholders, right? And so that kind of insider knowledge is priceless when you're trying to launch new technologies. You're not launching drugs like a standard pharma pipeline company where you know who to go to. You're launching new technologies that could possibly be used by 2 or 3 different stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And so getting those insights from an insider, I mean, that's priceless. That's what, if you look at successful companies that are really launching products day after the other, they're very strong on insights. So the clinician networks bring those insights to these entrepreneurs, and then they become the pilot test users in many cases. If these clinicians are passionate, they're mentoring people and they're advising and guiding people, they'll also kind of be the test cases, test subjects for these, and give real world evidence feedback on what's working and what's not working. And that's the difference between a great idea and a great exit. So, I mean, I hope that kind of lays out the value very, very clearly for those insights.
Thank you. Martyn, so, now that we've listened to the kind of market differentiating perspective on the startup and corporate side, what do you think makes us unique compared to other venture capital firms. And, and I have to say that, entering into this from the other side of the equation, having worn all the other operator hats, and it was never really my intention to, I had never had a great desire to become a venture capitalist, but it was the means to an end for us, because first of all, the democratization part is important, but more importantly, it was a vehicle for paying for creating a clinical global network of clinicians, right? Because anyone who's run a network knows that it's really, you don't make a huge amount of revenue from running a network necessarily. So what makes us unique to other venture capital firms, because we have this network behind us?
That's exactly what it is. You look at other venture capital firms, yes, they have advisors, they have specialists, but they don't have a whole network of subject matter experts. And I think that's the big key to the Global Health Impact Network and the Global Health Impact Fund, is having this network of experts behind us. They're not just investors. Some of the people on the network are amazing at what they do. They're at the top of their field. But it's not just that, it helps with the due diligence process. If you have a neurosurgeon startup, we have the subject matter experts in the network. As well, if you're, another VC firm, Anderson Howard or whatever, they're not going to have the neuroscience behind them. They might have people who know a lot about it, but they're not going to have the people who are at the top of their fields like we do. And I think that's what is the key differentiator between us and other health tech and other VC funds, is we have this network behind us.
Great. Thanks, Martyn. And then lastly, Bob. So, Bob, you've been with me right from the beginning with this. And our goal has always been to not just create a venture fund and a network focused only on innovation and investment, but to utilize that to create a much larger value proposition for our individual clinician members. And you and I have been working with individual doctors now for 27 plus years. So on the background, our GHIN network, as you know as well as I, is creating services like access to high quality continuing education, credentialing services, and other services like that. So from your perspective, how does the GHIN education network facilitate the distribution of individually developed content and platforms, and the opportunity for us as a network of clinicians to, almost from a precision perspective, design continuing education for the needs of our members?
Well, it's a great question, Gary. You got me thinking while you were asking it about my career in education and in business. I think each of us, I'll just say this as a preface, I think each of us reaches a point in life where we feel, from a material or financial point of view, at least this group of people, I think, probably thinks I've got enough. And when you have enough, then you start thinking about, what can I do to give back? How do you return something to the profession, to the industry, to humanity that's a contribution back from what humanity provided to you? And I actually see, in kind of a way, GHIN is the fruit of, hundreds of years of experience from the people involved in forming it, and thinking about the things they've learned, the mistakes they've made, and how they can improve on those things. And one of the virtues of the network, as I've come to experience it, is that it helps each of us formulate or conceive of those mistakes, those errors, and those learning opportunities, and put them into a forum where other people whose opinions we respect and whose experiences will be material can help us shape solutions to those problems. So, for example, I have a lot of clinician friends who are somewhat knowledgeable about finance, but they wouldn't really have the first idea about how to evaluate a business proposition other than from a clinical point of view. Well, that's something where maybe Gary and I can contribute something back to them. We can give them tools for doing that. Meanwhile, in the process, I'm probably a fairly well-educated lay member of the public, but I can learn more about how physicians think and how decisions are made in the clinical community. And that improves my ability to communicate with other non-clinical personnel, whether they're investors or managers or hospital administrators, to help them understand that this group of special people, the professional clinical community, has a way of thinking about things that's unique and distinctive. And our network, in my experience and to my mind's eye, gives us a premium tool for doing that. I'll leave it at that.
Great, thanks, Bob. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining this part of the discussion from the conference. I'd like to, I posted in the chat ways to contact us and to look up the network. And also I want to remind everyone that you've heard a bit about our hands-in platform and how Global Health Impact Network and Fund are developed on top of that collaborative communication platform. So post-conference, all the content for the conference will be available on the WISE network hands-in platform, the GHIN platform, where there will be a WISE community. All of the lectures will have their own individual threads with access to the lecturers, and it will be a place for every attendee and participant to continue the conversation after the conference and continue to collaborate around it. So we look forward to having everyone join our Global Health Impact Network and our Finance and Investment Network and our Education Network. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening. I'd like to thank Prasoon and his team for putting on an incredible conference, which is only halfway through. And thank you very much.